Hey out there, rock and rollers. Welcome to the 63rd edition of the Ugly American Werewolf in London Rock Podcast, recorded here in central London, just off historic Abbey Road, where we are talking about everything classic rock, hard rock, prog rock, heavy metal, early MTV, and more. The things that touch me, the wolf, and my partner in crime, Action Jackson, over the course of our lives. We are just two rock and roll fans who have an unquenchable thirst for all the knowledge and detail of rock music and its history, all the people who made it, and all the amazing music that's come out over the years. Now, when we started this thing, we didn't know anything about social media, and to be perfectly honest with you, we still don't really like most of social media. However, in building our Twitter fan base, and you can find us at ugly_werewolf or at actionjack72. We've really kind of developed a nice community of fellow rock fans, folks who are like us, who have passion about the music they love, who have great memories of listening to these tunes, finding the music, seeing these bands live over the course of our lives. And we don't want those memories to fade. We want to continue to learn more and more about rock and roll and share it with others who are like-minded. And so that's been one of the biggest benefits of doing this show for over a year now. We're a weekly show and we're up to number 63 here. So yes, we've been doing this over a year and it's been a lot of fun. One of the folks that we've kind of communicated with and gotten to know over the last year is our friend Chris from Canada. And you might know him as My Rock and Roll Heaven on Twitter or at Rock These Tweets. He has a very nice Twitter following, and he's very active on there. He's given us great information on which albums were released on certain days and who's having anniversaries and what they did chart-wise, what they did sales-wise. The stuff that he loves overlaps with a lot of the stuff that we do. We're about the same age. So we have a lot of the same experience as far as when we heard this music for the first time, what it meant to us growing up and how it has evolved in our lives over time. And we wanted to have him on the show for a while. And with this being the 35th anniversary of Guns N' Roses' big debut, Appetite for Destruction, we thought this was the perfect opportunity to have Chris on and give us a little bit different perspective as far as how the Canadian fan got to know Guns N' Roses. Because for me and Jackson, it was easy. It was MTV. We were way into MTV. You get a video on MTV and it blows you up, right? And although Welcome to the Jungle eventually became a big hit, it didn't kind of come out of the gate as a big hit. It took some time. It took some intervention by Mr. David Geffen to get them on MTV. But then once they did, they blew up into the biggest band in the world. But then after a 5-year run, they kind of went away, right? They made, as far as I'm concerned, 2.5 records. This one, Appetite for Destruction, huge debut with big hits on it. Then they did Lies, which was half new stuff, half live stuff that they already had laying around. And then they did the Use Your Illusion albums, which, yes, there's 2 albums, but about half of that is not that good. So you boil that down into one good album, and there's your 2.5 albums. Then they made the Spaghetti Incident, which was a covers album, which they didn't need to do since they already had a bunch of covers anyway. And then they went away. And it was just the Axl show as everyone, Izzy, Duff, Slash, eventually all left the band. And it was just Axl with a bunch of other guys, and it took him, 15 years and lots of players to make Chinese Democracy, which was basically overlooked. I'll admit I've never even heard it because, sorry, Axl, you missed your window, pal. And obviously Axl became notoriously difficult to work with. So we're going to explore their big debut, the one that set them on fire and made them huge all over the world. And we're glad to introduce our listeners to Chris because he's a super guy. He loves rock music. Even though recently on Def Lep Pod with our buddy Neil, he basically said you could take action, not words, off of Pyromania, which we had to have a problem with, right? I mean, that's Action's Def Leppard theme song. We used to sing that in the dorm before we would go out and party. So, no, that's not why we bumped him a week. We just wanted to get Neil Young out a week earlier because he was in the news and thought people might want to hear about his best albums while he's taking on Spotify and Joe Rogan. But we're really happy to have Chris on this week, and we're going to go in depth on Appetite for Destruction, and we're going to rank our songs 12 to 1 on the album, which is going to be interesting. I think there'll be some surprises on there for you. So let's get into it. It's Guns N' Roses' Appetite for Destruction with Chris from Rock These Tweets here on The Wolf. Let's go back then. Let's get back into 1987 when this was released, because this comes out in 87. It doesn't run right off the charts. It kind of takes a year to build momentum, and they have to get David Geffen, the head of the label, to use his power in the industry to finally get them on MTV, which helps them break. For me and Jackson, 87, 88, that's like our freshman year of high school. So, and we're into rock and roll, but we're starting to distance ourselves from the kids who just like pop music or just whatever MTV is feeding them or whatever, and not the R&B stuff. We like rock and roll, and we're starting to get into some other things. And then when this hits, because there's Bon Jovi's around with the teased hair, and they're good looking, and the crew is still pretty big at that point, right? So there is some good hard rock out there. But when these guys hit, and then Aerosmith's back in a big way, they're back and better than ever, right? In fact, Guns N' Roses opened for them on that tour. And so when these guys come out, I don't know, it's kind of like they fit into the LA scene, but there was something different about them. Like they were just a touch above on the musician side and a touch below, I feel like, on the sleaze side. Like even Rat and Motley Crue weren't as sleazy as these guys were, right? Well, what was it like, your impressions in Toronto in 87, 88?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's it takes me back to reliving some great memories. Like you guys said, 87, 88, I was in high school as well, so I was, that would have been grade 11 for me around there, and it was an interesting time because I had gotten into, pop music and all that stuff through the early 80s, and I had been listening to a lot. Like my favorite bands were like Survivor, and I loved all the pop music of the time. Mm-hmm. Where I grew up, I actually grew up north of Toronto in a smaller city, and it was interesting growing up in an environment where, so back then, we obviously didn't have, the social media we have now, and you could find songs at the drop of a hat and pull something up. So where I grew up, we had 3 radio stations. 2 of them were like top 40 pop. 1 was country, right? So I didn't have access easily to a lot of hard rock and metal. What opened the window to me for that in 1984 was we had our version of MTV launch called Much Music.
Right.
Okay, yeah. Right? So video played a huge part for me. Up until that point, I wasn't, I could go to the local record store and I'd see the latest Iron Maiden album sitting on the shelf, and the cover would terrify me. Right. I was like, wow, what the heck is that?
Sure.
So I didn't get into that kind of stuff until the advent of music video. So I was listening again to, like you said, a lot of pop music, and Much Music was really what opened up the world of all of this stuff to me, Crew and Leopard and Whitesnake and Aerosmith. And it was a show called the Pepsi Power Hour, which played hard rock metal videos at 4 o'clock in the afternoon for an hour after school.
Nice.
Right? So that was what was happening kind of in my musical spectrum back in that time. So like you said, summer of 87, when this comes out, I had been into Permanent Vacation, right? It was huge.
Right.
Whitesnake's self-titled album was massive. We were playing that constantly. Girls to come out from the Crew, all that stuff. So 87 was a huge hard rock and metal year for me. I had really delved into all of this while still listening to a lot of other stuff. And this record, when it came out, quite honestly, this was released at a time when also Hysteria was released a couple weeks later.
Right.
And it's interesting that both of these albums, like you said, did nothing.
Right. Out of the gates?
When they came right out of the gate, did nothing.
Nothing.
And we, in North Bay, where I grew up, this small city, we didn't hear any of this on the radio. So, this was not in anybody's wheelhouse. People weren't playing it at school. You wouldn't have asked anybody in the summer of 87, who Guns N' Roses was. I don't know if it was different in the States and there was a little bit of buzz, but for me, where I was, this didn't hit anyone's radar. Even Hysteria really didn't either, but, Appetite for Destruction was certainly way down the list. And, quite honestly, the first time I remember even hearing anything about it was probably not until 1988, like earlier in 88. And a friend of mine who had actually lived in Europe had moved back, and they had actually heard it.
Oh, really?
And were on top of it. Well, at least he was, yeah.
Okay.
So, here where I was plugging away, completely oblivious to the fact this band was out. And he comes back from Europe and has this cassette and is like, oh my God, you got to hear this new band, Guns N' Roses. And he played me Welcome to the Jungle. This is probably like spring of 88. So what? The album had been out for 7 months
or more, yeah.
Right. And I think, like you said, Mac, I think what had happened with it was there was literally in the US, there was no radio play for it. Right. I think even MTV didn't really even want to play the videos.
No,
and
they
the first
did not.
Single, I think was
they didn't fit the whole Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, Pretty Boy image. They were too dirty for MTV.
They were too, yeah, exactly. I think the media didn't know what to do with them. Like MTV at that time, right? They didn't get play on radio, so it was one of those things. Like they were about to be, I think, almost abandoned by the label. Was going to be like, screw it. They'd sold a couple 100,000 copies and they were going to be out. But back to where I heard this. Like I heard this. My friend played me this great song, "Welcome to the Jungle," which I think still has one of the best opening riffs of all time.
Absolutely.
And I was like, wow, this is fantastic. So that's when it kind of first hit my radar, like 7 or 8 months after the release. But it wasn't something, again, that I went out and clamored for and was like, oh my God, I got to find this record. It was more of just a slow kind of burn into it. And I can tell you that, in my immediate circle and just overall, with, my class in high school and what was going on there, I don't remember anyone of my peers here in my social circle talking about it at that point, listening to it, which is interesting, right? Because, it really was, like you said, something different that whether or not we had all been just, kind of set in our mode of, we had our Crew, we had our Whitesnake, we had our Aerosmith, and we weren't open to listening to something else, or whether or not it just, at that time, it hadn't just quite gotten that extra push, which it did when Sweet Child of Mine came out, right?
Right. Well, Jackson, tell me a little bit about your kind of first discovering of GNR. And was it the video? Was it the Welcome to the Jungle video, or did you hear it on the radio, or what happened?
No, I think the first time, I was trying to remember this going into this, the first time that I think I had heard about them, kind of like, in the ether somewhere. But then I remember I saw the Sweet Child O' Mine video on MTV, and I said, the song is but these guys look really cool. You're right. They weren't the glam guys. They looked greasy. They looked like they kind of just woke up, probably smelled like 3 days worth of BO and cigarettes. And yeah, it was just like, wow, the song is not great, but the look is just cool. Everybody knew they were from LA, like the club scene from LA. They had the street cred. And then a little bit after that movie, The Deadpool, came out. Remember, it was a Clint Eastwood, and Welcome to the Jungle was in that. And that was kind of the first time I had heard that. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute.
Yes.
Wait a minute. Mm-hmm. And then somehow I ended up with a copy of the cassette tape. I don't know whether I kind of, sticky fingered it from somebody, or I don't know where I got it from, but I listened to that front to back forever once I got a hold of this, because it was fantastic. We did a show on Doors' LA Woman, and we did a show on the Eagles' Hotel California, and they kind of painted this picture of, it's mystical and it's so nice out on the West Coast, and LA Woman, how I love the city of LA. This was, LA is a hellhole, disgusting. It looks beautiful, but it's got this underbelly, and it was fantastic. I could not get enough of this, because they just seemed like the real deal. They didn't seem like they were posers. I mean, we talked about Hysteria. I love Hysteria, but it's super polished. It's like glass. This is not that. This is raw. And these were 5 guys who were, you can kind of get stuck on Slash and Axl, but Duff, Izzy, and Steven Adler are definitely giant parts of this band. And once Adler and Stradlin left the band, it was never the same.
Yeah. Definitely after Izzy left, it was not the same. Yeah. No, I'm with you. I mean, here's the thing. Sweet Child of Mine doesn't come out till the summer of '88, right? So I seem to remember there was controversy about the cover. There's the original cover that they really wanted to put out, which is basically like a robot that's raping a woman, but then there's some kind of horrible creature that's going to punish the raping robot. I'm like, that was never going to work, right?
Well, that piece
Walmart's not putting that on the shelf.
Yeah, right. That piece of artwork is actually titled Appetite for Destruction, and so that's where they got the name from. Yeah, you're right. The PMRC and the Walmart people are like, I don't know what this is, but it's not going into the stores. And I think Rose already had that tattoo on his arm. of the cross.
Oh, wow.
Because I guess he was a big Thin Lizzy fan, so he really loved the Celtic cross. And so I think he got a lot of crap, like, oh, you got the tattoo because of the album. He's like, no, the album was because of this. They had to kind of last minute punt this thing into the stores.
Right.
Exactly. But then, you put a cross on there, and there's going to be groups in America who don't like that either. Like, so that was controversial too. I remember that getting press before I even knew who the band was. And I may have been like you, Jackson, that I heard Sweet Child of Mine first, but I remember the video Welcome to the Jungle. I saw that before. And they weren't going to play it on MTV, and Geffen himself basically had to push them and say, look, just run it 3 times this week, like at 3 a.m. or something like that. Just sneak it in there when no one's watching anyway. Of course, metalheads got to look at it. They got to listen to it. You got to play that. And it was most requested for the longest time. What was interesting about that video to me is that Axl has his hair all teased up, right?
Yeah, a little glam, right?
Yep, just like all the other kids on the Sunset Strip did back then. Everybody looked like that. But that's not really the way he usually looks, and he never looked like that ever again. In any video ever, photo shoot ever, it's the straight, red hair with the bandana around it, and that's his look. But so it kind of shows like they're doing what they have to do to try to make it. It's like, okay, I got to have my hair teased up like Kip Winger. Fine, I'll do that, if you'll get us on MTV. But then after that, they're like, no, we're going to go down as ourselves. And I think that really helped their authenticity as far as connecting with the audience that they eventually would.
Yeah, they're in relation to what you're talking about there with the glam. They had that glam look for a bit. They did a bit of the makeup. And with the scene that was going on at the time, right, where glam metal, and I hate to say it, hair metal was massive. They were kind of like the anti-glam metal band at the time that everybody, I think, once they did, get that initial, once Welcome to the Jungle came out on MTV and they got that initial exposure, I think there was almost like people were it was everywhere, right? Like it was, glam metal was just like that. Every band was coming up, looked the same.
Right.
A lot of it, we started to talk about, you could talk about the kind of like the decline of that genre. Almost started, I think, with Appetite for Destruction and Guns N' Roses coming out, in the sense that they were completely a 180 away from that. Dirty, they looked, like you said, like they just crawled out of the gutter in LA off the Sunset Strip.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the fans at that time, once they realized who Guns N' Roses were and what the music was, were like, this is so different and so cool, that's when it started to explode. And the Sweet Child of Mine thing, you launched that song in the summer of '88, and instantly you've got the female fans now too, right? Because it's a ballady song, kind of, right? It's more approachable, and I think that was the point when I think Guns N' Roses became the band of the time, right there. I know for me, when summer of '88 hit and Sweet Child of Mine hit, that's when it exploded. From that point through till probably like the end of '89 up here, you could not go anywhere without that video. I think played like every hour on the hour on Much Music. Like you said, it was all over MTV. The song was everywhere, and you couldn't escape Guns N' Roses. And that album, I would have been in grade 12 at that point. That was like every single kid in my high school had a copy of Appetite for Destruction, and that was all we listened to for like a year.
Yeah. Well, then they backed that with Paradise City. The next single is Paradise City, which maybe is filmed at Donington, or it was filmed in front of a big crowd.
Somewhere huge.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So they're already enormous at that point. And of course, I guess they played the last Donington because a couple people died there. And then after that, they said, okay, we're not gonna do that anymore, which is kind of too bad, because as someone who now lives in the UK, I might like to go see a Donington summer show. But
I'd love to. That's a bucket list Donington for me.
That would be amazing,
The other thing is, you were talking about like the glam rock, and even back to Sweet Child of Mine. The first thing that really struck me was how Slash was playing the Les Paul, which looked awesome, and then Izzy had the big, what was that, like an ES-355 or something, that
like a
black
hollow
one.
volley.
Yeah, and it just looked. This wasn't the BC Rich. This wasn't the the kind of the cheese metal stuff. These guys, they just look legitimate. They look like a band you would want to go see and party with afterward if you could handle the ride.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I felt more akin to them than, say, Poison. It's
Right.
like those guys all teased and tarted up. I'm like, I wouldn't want to look like that even for millions of dollars. But like the Gunners are like, yeah, I could look like that. I just don't bathe for a while and wear some leather. And yeah, I could dig that. Even though I was a really straight, clean cut kid, it just seemed like that they were more human than the other guys were somehow.
I was going to say, to me, the bands like Poison and even Whitesnake, it looked like it was kind of like a persona they would put on. Okay, you got to get ready. Okay, let's get the hair ready. These guys look like you could run into them at 2 p.m. or 2 p.m, and they'd look exactly the same. They could just get up on stage and play. Come on, let's have one more drink and do it. So yes, they just seemed a lot more authentic than some of the other bands at that time.
Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. And I think they were definitely one of those bands that lived exactly how
that's right.
Practice what they
preached, and kudos to them for. I remember watching. It might have been the Behind the Music that I just watched. Talking about the recording process of this album, and Mike Klink, the producer, literally trying to get these guys in with their party lifestyle to actually get this album done was a challenge on its own, right? They are living the life. They are partying like there's no tomorrow. And he's like, we got to get this album recorded somehow.
Someone's going to die, right? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But that's part of their authenticity, too. Like Blackie Lawless, he's this demonic guy with, fire shooting out of his crotch. But it's all an act. And when he gets off, he goes back to being Todd or whatever his real name is. And, he reads books and stuff like that. I was doing the notes for this show. It's like Izzy Stradlin did go ahead and graduate from high school with a D average. He is the only member of Guns N' Roses to have graduated from high school. I'm like, that's Guns N' Roses right there, man.
That's crazy.
This is Neil from Def Leppard Pod, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London rock podcast.
Well, let's get into the album a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
We can talk a little bit about how it was put together. I mean, Live Like a Suicide was kind of a 4 or 5 song thing that they'd put out because, Geffen's like, they're not ready to make a whole record yet, in 86 or whatever that was. And Paul Stanley from Kiss actually worked with him, flirted with Axl for a while, helped him change some songs around, and he was going to produce them before they got Klink on there. I never knew that before doing research for this.
Yeah, did you know that Spencer Proffer, too, helped them out? Quiet Riot's producer.
Well, I read that, too, getting into this. I'm like, it's either they were so great, they attracted all this talent, or it was like nobody really knew what to do with them, so we tried what would stick to the wall, right?
I think that's probably the case. It's like, Paul Stanley, can you imagine? I think he probably would have been like,
right.
I'm out. I don't know what to do with these guys.
After 10 minutes, like, geez, you guys are all Ace Frehley. Like, I gotta go.
Can you imagine, though, how different this album would have sounded if Paul Stanley had actually... Well, I don't think it ever would have happened.
Right.
But
that's
anyways,
my thing.
Yeah.
There was some. I read something about, and I don't know if this ever really was a true thing, but they had floated the idea of Mutt Lange doing it.
Oh my God, are you kidding me?
The same thing, like that just never would have happened. He would have just strangled them because the perfection that he has. Although one of the big pain points, I guess, was Axl's vocals on this. He wanting to record basically a line at a time. Right. I just don't think it would have worked out with Mutt.
Never.
I don't think they wanted to spend. I don't think Geffen wanted to spend the money on Mutt, and I don't think Mutt would have lasted long with the boys either, from what I can.
Plus, he had to do Hysteria, so it all worked out.
Exactly.
All right, but you start off, guys. You start off with this "Welcome to the Jungle," like you say. This could be the best intro to any album ever. But then when you put it in, it's their debut album. It's like, who are you? What are you about? Tell us. And it's like Running with the Devil with Van Halen, but that's got this kind of thump plotting to it. It doesn't have the magic of Eruption or some of the other songs. It's like, it's a build up to what you're going to get to. Welcome to the Jungle, punch you in the face. Here we go. Exactly. We're on the train, 100 miles an hour, right? And it's an anthem. Welcome to the Jungle. You're going to die.
And it really helps in the days of MTV to have that visual of Axl Rose getting off the bus with the hay in his mouth, just like, hey, golly, and then just, oh my God, what did I just get myself into? This is not what I thought it would be. This is just there's hookers going by, there's guys trying to sell him drugs right off the bat. Yeah, it's just, I mean, that's what you wanted. But yeah, to your point, Mac, just that intro riff. I kind of got away from this song when I was listening to it back in high school, just because I thought it was overplayed.
Oh, interesting.
But now I would actually skip all the big singles while I was listening to it. But this, just going back to it and listening to it again, yeah, the intro riff is just, there is no warm up. They throw you right under the bus on this thing.
Yeah, and Slash is super heavy on this one. I feel like that intro is hot. I guess that, you know where you are? You're in the jungle, baby. It's like some homeless guy screamed that at him in New York. Like he went to New York City as a young man, and he was, goofing off. And he's like, you know where you are, kid? You're going to die. And he's like, yeah, that's a good lyric right there. I'll file that one away for later. But you can't deny that it really launched them. However, not dissimilar to Def Leppard's Hysteria, that was not the first single off the album.
No. And you know what? I didn't know that for years. I thought it was.
I know.
I had no idea.
First one I heard, but the first one they released was kind of the double A side, It's So Easy, and Mr. Brownstone, which was released in the UK, which actually, it didn't do great. It got maybe to the top 100, but as our friend Neil tells you, if you don't make it to the top 40, it doesn't really matter. No one really hears it. But I always thought that was interesting. Like, why did they choose those two? Obviously, they know Welcome to the Jungle's Great Statement, because it's the first song on side A, or Side G, as it was. They didn't have A and B. They had Side G and R.
Right?
Very tricky, boys.
Yeah, I think, you know what? That those two, that released as a double A single or whatever in the UK, I think it just speaks to the record company, the label, etc., having no idea what the hell to do with this band. Like, I think there was a period of time where obviously they were so different and dangerous, and what do we do with them? Like, how do we launch a band like this? And the album, I think, again, like I said, I didn't know anything about it for months, but I think even in the US, when they released the album at the end of July or whatever it was, that it wasn't released to like big boom media push with billboard ads and like plastered everywhere.
Right.
It was like a trickle. It just got, okay, it's going to come out, right? And then, nothing happened with it.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the case. I mean, that's just my own personal opinion, but I think it's one of those things where it's like, well, let's just put it out there. Let's see what happens.
Right.
And nobody got behind it out of the get-go, which is, looking back now, is like, I can't believe it exploded like it did, based on the fact that it took literally months for anyone from the label, etc., to actually get the train going. But yeah, interesting. Like that, It's So Easy and Mr. Brownstone. Two great songs.
Yeah.
Like two great songs. But to your point, like releasing those as the first single from an album that, Welcome to the Jungle obviously is the introduction that you want to have for this band.
Absolutely.
Right? So yeah, it's one of those things, like, I bet you label and management people look back now and are like, what were we thinking?
I know. And I will say, though, when they kind of bring it down in the middle where it changes pace a little bit, there's a quick, there's a quick cowbell from Steven. Maybe the best use of a cowbell outside of Don't Fear the Reaper and Honky Tonk Women, as far as I'm concerned. But that's just me. What's also interesting is, back in the day, they credited all songs written by Guns N' Roses. Since then, it's kind of filtered out who actually wrote these songs, and that was Slash and Axl together. But the second song, It's So Easy, was one that Duff had written with Wes Arkeen, like prior to being in Guns N' Roses, and then they kind of outfitted it for the record. But I mean, this once you hear it, this is pretty dirty and sleazy, talking about how girls take care of them, which was common on the Sunset Strip. If you were a good-looking guy or even a terrible-looking guy in a band, girls would work straight jobs and basically support you. Give you money for food, give you money for booze and drugs, let you borrow all their hair care and makeup products for the stage, right? And that was just what they needed to do. But, obviously you get, looking back 30 years later at some of these misogynistic tones. At first, I thought it was a hilarious song back in the day. Now I'm like, well, this is even kind of ugly, even for dirty rock and roll. You know what I mean?
just the concept, because I was listening to this again, it's so easy when everyone's trying to please me. Like just having that mentality of, I do what I want. And I get these throwaway people in my life that I can use and abuse and throw them out. Yeah, it's of the time, but you're right. It does not, this one especially doesn't age well.
Yeah, the lyrical content of a lot of their stuff, right, has not aged well. But at the time, like you said, it was of the day. And, personally listening to this as a 16-year-old back then, I didn't even make any connection to some of the, shall we say now, inappropriate or misogynistic or racist. Remember, there was an issue with, some of the other songs on Lies with Guns lyrics, and it got a little crazy, but that was what was happening then. And that's what partly, you get, like they say, there's, bad publicity is good publicity, right? And
that's right.
I think it just attracted when a lot of that stuff was being talked about, like the lyrics, and it wasn't exactly, what people were used to potentially. And it was causing a little bit of an uproar, and the whole PMRC thing going on at the time.
Right.
To me, that's like, you slap a warning label on this about lyrics, I'm buying it now.
That's like, free sales booster, man. That's what Nikki Sixx is like, put it on my record, man. I'll make the lyrics worse so you will put it on there,
Totally.
Didn't I think Steven Tyler said that during some kind of award ceremony? He wanted to thank Tipper Gore and the PMRC for guarantee if I use the F-bomb on my record, it'll sell 1 million copies. Because you saw that parent, explicit lyrics. I gotta have that. I want every record I have to have that on
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
But what also, back then, again, these guys, and specifically talking about this album and the writing, like you said earlier, Mac, these guys are writing about what they're seeing, what they're experiencing, the streets, LA, the sleeves, all that stuff, which, by 87, 88 and all the glam metal going on, this was a welcome change and refreshing. And, songs like It Ain't Easy, or, It's So Easy, just become this completely different musical experience, from the way it sounds to the lyrics when you listen to them. Like you said, this was fresh, this was dangerous, and it was man, I need to get more of this, right?
Yeah, yeah. And third song, Night Train. We all know what Night Train is. It's the cheapest wine there is. We've been teenagers before. We've had our taste. Let's stay away from that. But you can see him sitting in the gutter, behind somewhere in the strip, all of them passing the bottle around. I'm on the Night Train. I believe that happened. It's basically the way the song came together, I think.
100%,
Yeah.
Yeah, and this has got a great intro. Just that, bum, 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 and then that first riff, or the first chord, and then it goes into the song. And while It's So Easy is about debauchery with other people, this aged, unfortunately, really well, because I was in Atlanta for a football game a couple of weeks ago, and went to a club and unfortunately drank too much. And I woke up the next morning and I literally said in my head, ready to crash and burn. I never learned. Son of a gun. Here we are.
It's
again.
So true.
And just that concept of loaded like a freight train. Fantastic.
Is that an awesome lyric or what?
Oh,
perfect.
Goodness.
No, I love the riff and the rhythm on this one. This is a great song. Slash's jamming at the end of the song is really hot to me. I mean, I think he really brings it out on this one. And you'll see, Chris. We always have one or two that we forget. It's easy to remember the big singles, right? It's easy to remember your favorite deep tracks. There's always going to be some you forget. This isn't one of them. This is one that I always loved and has aged well, and I hold it in high esteem on this album.
Agreed. I think it was the last single, too, if I recall.
That's right.
They released to Rock Radio.
2 years later, basically, after it came out.
Exactly 2 years later.
Which is unbelievable. I mean, you've got 6 weeks now, and if the first single doesn't make it, that's it. There's no second single. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, the fact that this album spent the length of time that it did on the charts obviously speaks to, I think it was 150 weeks or something. But, when you've got Night Train, which is one of the best songs on the record, coming out as the last single 2 years after it's been released, you got something here. You got something here.
That's for sure.
The great thing that they kind of attribute to Izzy Stradlin is he wrote a lot of them, or he contributed a lot to the songs. Some would say he wrote a lot of the songs, but what they said is he just had the ability to float along. Slash was, he played the bit, and then he would just come whoop and drop some stuff in and fade in and out and give you exactly what you needed. in the song. Kind of I read something like he had the Charlie Watts coolest guy in the room vibe. Like didn't say a whole lot, but he just knew exactly what to do. And I think on this one, I can hear that kind of just that peppering in exactly what you need. Not trying to talk over Slash, but just giving him a boost there.
Yeah, he put some flavor in there. Like at the beginning of
Yeah.
Welcome to the Jungle, that's Izzy, you know, just putting a little texture in there while Slash is doing the riff. You know, they meld well together.
This is Neil from Def Leppard, and you're listening to the Ugly American Werewolf in London rock podcast.
All right, number 4, Out to Get Me. This is Axl talking about his days back in Lafayette, Indiana, when he was just a juvenile delinquent and he got arrested something like 20 times or something like that. Ended up doing about 3 months worth of time on many different little spots. And when they were really ready to ring him up for good, he's like, okay, I think it's time for me to go to LA and do this right. I think he had a troubled childhood. I mean, the story is his father was a delinquent who was 21, got his 16-year-old mother pregnant, then ditched her 18 months later after Axl was born. He ended up getting murdered later in life. The guy who she married was a real tough Christian, you know, one of those people who you think he's instilling good values, but he beats them and maybe sexually abused his sisters. Like, God, he came from a rough place. So it doesn't shock you that he might get into a band that sings this way and lives this kind of lifestyle. But I think this is it's definitely an outlaw song. And obviously with a lyric like, so you can suck me? Well, hey, that's just being real straightforward there, Axl.
Probably not something you want to say to the cops when they're arresting you.
That's right.
But you know, again, the time that this came out, and no, I was never arrested as a high schooler. Let's get that perfectly clear.
Took to college before you got arrested, right, Jackson?
Exactly. Right. Before they caught up with me, that as a teenage boy. Just hearing that, you know, out to get me. You know what, man? They are out to get me. The world. And so you kind of had that, not really the connection, but kind of that theme that was, you know, percolating through your brain. You know, they're out to get me, but I'm innocent.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, this, again, like this, hearing it when you sit down and actually listen to all these songs, especially now, going back and listening to the content, the lyrics and all, like Out to Get Me. Like a kid growing up at this time with this album, like so many of these songs speak to you, right? Even from the sense, like you said, you know, I wasn't a delinquent and wasn't arrested, but it was like, wow, like, you know, I'm feeling like everybody, my parents don't get me, you know.
Yeah.
You know, I just need something to rebel against, and like this is the soundtrack, right? For like,
it's almost like you had a friend, and the friend was this bad boy dude. Like, yeah, I know this dude, and he's bad, and he does bad things. Yeah,
yeah. Then this guy, you know, this is the guy that my parents don't want me hanging around with.
Yes.
But yeah, the Out to Get Me is one of those. Again, it's a deep album cut, but man, like it's. Quite honestly, like looking back on these songs now, these 12 songs, like it is really a case of, you know, maybe not every single one of them, but pretty close to all these could have been singles, just in the sense of if you're talking about what a single is, you know, it's a great track. There really isn't a weak song on this, and Out to Get Me is a great example of that, right? Like it's the 4th track on the album.
It's got a great riff to it at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
and it certainly speaks to, again, like what a lot of kids at the time would have been like, yeah, this is what I want to hear, right? But again, this radio isn't playing this stuff.
Right. No, you can't get it on the radio, you know. Can't get it on the radio today, you know, so.
Right, exactly.
Absolutely. Even Mr. Brownstone, which occasionally I might hear on the radio, maybe late at night, because there aren't necessarily bad words in it, but you're talking about heavy-duty content, yes, heroin addiction, and basically I think Izzy and Slash were like, this was our daily life, you know, like what a bummer it is to be on H. But I back then I loved this song, and I just, you know, the whole notion of I used to do a little, but a little wouldn't do it, then a little got more. I'm like, that's what addiction is. That's obviously what it is.
And this one's got a really cool intro too. It doesn't sound like anything else. It's got that
waka kind of thing. Got going on.
Yeah, and then. My wife gets mad too because I use I don't worry about nothing. No, because worrying's a waste of my time. Like when she's like, "Aren't we gonna do it?" I'm like, "Nah, don't worry about that." So yeah, just another great. Again, like you. Oh, I know these guys, and they're dirtbags, and they live this dirtbag life. And, for a minute, you kind of you're at the fence and you kind of just look over like, what's going on over there? Oh, it's bad over there. Back down again. But yeah, just a glimpse into what that lifestyle was like. And to your point, Mac, they really did. They weren't just singing about it. They lived that. They would have to, like you said, when they were recording, Clank would show up and be like, what am I going to get today? Who's going to show up? Are they going to be ready to roll? They had that. What was that award show that it was Slash and
AMAs
went up there, and they were
American Music Awards. Wasted.
Yeah, not just like wasted drunk. Like, oh god, they were having a great time. Yeah,
Oh my God.
They lived the lifestyle.
I miss award shows like that, by the way.
Right.
I know. Award shows are so lame these days. But then you wrap up
Great song.
side G, or side 1, if you will, with Paradise City, and this was huge for them. Huge song, huge video. I think it was, once this got released, then they really started to take off in America. Like, this is when it got up to like number 2 in the charts, and started to sell hundreds of thousands a week, sometimes. Over 30 million now, 18 million, a million in Canada. You should be proud of that.
Very rare does that happen.
That's a diamond, right? That's a diamond sale in Canada.
It's diamond.
Yeah.
A limited number of people have sold them. That's like at that time, that'd be 1 in 24, 25 people bought.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
Wow.
Yes. That's to give you an idea of the scope.
That's pretty impressive. Yeah,
This is one of my favorite songs, though, on this album for sure. Still is too.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of an anthem, as a teenage boy listening to this. Yeah, grass is green and the girls are pretty. That's, what else do you want in life? I mean, it's fantastic. And the other thing too of the video, if you put that into it at that giant festival, and we didn't have anything like that in America.
No,
nothing that big. And so to see something like that, you're like, wow, wouldn't you love to be at that show and be amongst all those people in this giant field listening to this? Yeah, it just added to the mystique of the band. It just kind of showed at that point in time how they were, how big they really were.
Yeah, that video, I think, for me, kind of solidified it, because that was the video that showed off, like, this is GNR live, right? Like, this is what you're going to see at a show. And for me, it was like, this band is... I got to see these guys, and they have an amazing live experience, right?
And the other cool part about this thing too is it kind of starts off like that, like that anthem, like "Take Me Down to the Paradise," blah, blah, blah. But then it gets nasty though when he's talking about just living under the and you're right. When he, in the video, like, I think he's got a hat on or something. He just throws it down and he starts singing, like, it's an anthem song, but it's also like hard and nasty too.
And almost 7 minutes long, right?
Yeah.
Which for a single, Guns N' Roses has had some epic.
Yeah, November Rain's the longest song ever to hit the top 10, like ever.
Exactly,
Yeah.
But again, like it's that wasn't happening at the time. We had 3 minute, Talk Dirty to Me, all those, right? And then this stuff, which is epic songs that just 6 minutes and 46 seconds, whatever it was.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem like it's that long of a song because it just grabs you and you're like into it. And it's got so many different levels to it that, like I said, it's still one of my favorite songs from this album. And it hasn't, to me, I know some people think, it's a little bit overplayed or whatever, but I'm of the mindset that this is kind of one of their signature tracks.
No doubt.
I agree. I would have agreed with you back in the day. Like I said, I skipped this song when I was listening to it, hard and heavy. But going back now,
interesting.
Because I'd heard it so many times.
Right.
But now I can appreciate it for being a great track and one of their signature songs.
Well, it's been their show closer for more than 30 years because it does pick up to double time. Like with 2.5 minutes left, all of a sudden they're going faster, right? Which makes it a great way to kind of crescendo to bring the show to a close. I'm with you, Jackson. I got a little sick of it back in the day. Not to mention, because Izzy and Axl were from Indiana, and I'm from a place called Louisville, Kentucky, which is south of Indiana. So many people in Louisville were convinced that it was about Louisville because, hey, they're from Indiana. They want to go down to the Paradise. I'm like, no, man. They're talking about L.A. on a trip back from San Francisco. It's got nothing. You have no proof that Axl Rose even set foot in the city of Louisville. Not to mention, Indianapolis is south of Lafayette. Why wouldn't he be talking about that? You morons.
That's so funny.
So I mean, look, it is definitely a signature song. It was great, huge back in the day, but it was one of those. like you said, Chris, it's like they were ubiquitous. They were everywhere. So you better like them. But if there was one you didn't like, that was going to drive you nuts. And this was kind of the one that did that to me.
Right.
All right. So we shift gears here to side 2, to the R side. And by the way, yes, I did have this on cassette, but I didn't buy it. My class went on a school trip to Chicago, and we were on one of those big buses, like going around the city or whatever. And they had these like long things that you could use. You tilt them, and that would help crack open the window or whatever. Or you could bust the window out if there was a fire you had to get off or whatever. And they moved just a little bit. And someone had left the cassette in there, and I tilted it, and out popped Appetite for Destruction. I'd never owned. I'm like, holy
jackpot!
Just not the case. Just the cassette itself.
Okay.
Like someone had probably stuck it in there so no one grabbed it while they were switching tapes on the previous trip or whatever. And I'm like, would you look at that? Free Appetite for me. So that's when I got to listen to all this. But
that's a great story.
they say that the first one is about violence and hard living and all that, the first side of the record, and the second side's about love and sex and stuff like that. So we start off with My Michelle. It's not really a ballad. It is about a girl, but it's about a girl, I guess, Michelle Young, who was buddies with Slash in high school and ended up hanging out with these guys, had a kind of long on-again, off-again relationship with Axl, and they were riding together in the car one day. Elton John's Your Song came on. She goes, wow, I wish somebody would write a song for me one day. So Axl obliged her, and then I guess he wrote one song that was too sweet, and it's like, that's not really the song I want to make. So then he wrote this one about you get your Coke for free and all that kind of stuff. And so she was immortalized by the song. I don't know. What do you guys think about this, the way you start off side 2 with this My Michelle here?
It's like you grab the handbrake and have a real quick left turn, because this, you have Paradise City, woo, and then you get into this. I love the way it starts off, that kind of slow bum,
kind of Sabbathy,
and then bump, and then it goes into the hard part, and then talking about you're into porno now that your dad's not around, your mother's dead, and just this story of this person. I mean, I didn't know if she was real or not back then, but just who's fallen into kind of this horrible lifestyle, and it's a love song to this person who I'm like, is this person even still alive? Like, it's just really, again, it's one of those, to me, it was one of those stories from the hard side of LA that, you came there to live this dream and you ended up having this kind of this nightmare of what was really happening.
Yeah. Can you imagine, as the person who was the subject of this song, this Michelle?
Yeah.
Wow. Way to have yourself immortalized forever, right? Like Guns N' Roses in a song like
some
this.
Of it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly how it was happening.
No,
I like it as a song to kick off side 2. Right? Remember back in the day when you'd put on a record and you'd put on the first side and you listen to it front to back and then you flip it over.
Yep.
Like, I think it's a nice, you had that, like you said, that big kind of Paradise City, like full on, and then you flip the record over and you start side 2. And it's this, which is kind of like you cleanse the palate a bit and you jump into this one, which again, it's one of those songs on this album that it's a deeper album cut, but not really to me, because I think, again, it's a song that, it would have been a weird choice for a single, and I know it's never going to be released as a single, but it's a fantastic track. Like,
you could definitely imagine hearing this, somebody playing this on the radio.
Exactly.
Maybe during, it was later at night, somebody who maybe one of the cooler disc jockeys that was going to take you on a little bit of a ride, but it definitely could have been on the radio.
Right, for sure.
No, she was very real, and she did party heavy. And I think I read an interview with her from a guy who ran like a Guns N' Roses site or something, finally kind of tracked her down. Said, she's like, I got out of the lifestyle, right? Got out of LA, went and got married, had a couple kids. I'm a mom now. And like, okay, my son's in here. Let me get him out of here so I'm not talking about, when I went to rehab and all the whole months. It was kind of interesting.
Exactly.
But yeah, I'm glad she made it, because not everybody from that time and that orbit did.
Sadly, no.
But next, think about you. This is one. This is the one that I really did forget about. I remembered the first chorus, but I don't remember the whole song. And
me too.
I really like this one. The interlude in the middle has on the chorus with the ringing guitars is very different. than everything else on this album to me. And this is one that Izzy basically wrote on his own. And so listen to this one was like, because I just figured, look, I'm going to remember these, and some of them I'm going to like, and some of them not. But I'm like, I truly kind of forgot about this one. And this, I think, is really good, kind of because it stands out from the rest of them.
Yeah, I think you're right. This is one where, I mean, I know this record back to front, but yeah, hearing that again, it's not that I forgot about it, but I forgot how much I liked it. Yeah, and it's a little bit of a different vocal delivery from Rose, which I think kind of overall, I don't think he gets enough credit for that. He's got a unique style, but he can change it up and down a little bit. Like I remember when Patience came out, and I heard it on the radio, and I was like, wait a minute. Before, like when he goes into it, you can hear it, but at the beginning, I'm like, well, that's somebody else. That's not Axl Rose. But he can change his vocal stylings up, and yeah, you can kind of hear the difference of Izzy kind of writing this by himself too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a song for me exactly the same, Mac, that I had forgotten about. Like, I quite honestly, up until I listened to the whole album last week again, like front to back for the first time in a while.
Right.
And I could not have told you prior to last week what this song sounded like. I completely forgot about it.
Yeah.
But it's a good song. And I think it's one too that was an older one, right? That Izzy had kicking around.
I think so, yeah.
Way back that they used to play in the early days that was in their set list. And, it's one that, like you said, Axl's vocals are great on it. Mm-hmm. And it's one that I'll go back now and be like, oh, I need to play this one more, because it's kind of, I think it's the one song in the album that I think most people would say is like, I don't remember that one, or I don't listen to that one, which is unfortunate because it is a good song. And
it's also kind of a nice change of pace from My Michelle also. Like that was kind of a downer, and then now we're kind of ramping it back up again.
Yeah, I mean Slash used his SG on that My Michelle, like an old SG to kind of give it a little darker, Sabbathy kind of thing to it. But he's kind of back on his Les Pauls for that. But okay, there's a reason a lot of people didn't listen to it. Because the next song is Sweet Child of Mine. And there's your reason right there. Yeah. And Sweet Child of Mine could not have been a bigger hit for them. Like you say, Chris, it got the girls into them. Like, Welcome to the Jungle. Okay, yeah, adrenalized boys are going to love that. But Sweet Child of Mine, even though it's not really a ballad, but that opening, which is not even that hard to play, it's an iconic opening.
Oh, yeah.
Wasn't it some kind of like practice thing that Slash would do? And they were like, no, that we should use that. He's like, no, I'm just noodling around.
It was a joke.
Yeah, and I think the same thing with Dust in the Wind from Kansas. That opening part.
Or Joe Walsh from Life in the Fast Lane. He's like, no, man, that's like a pat my head, rub my belly thing. That's not a song. Glenn's like, no, yes, it is. Yes, it is. I'm going to write something to that right now. Yeah. He's like, okay, there you go. But it's amazing how that works sometimes. Like, this is something I use. It's a finger, to get me warmed up, to get my fingers ready to go. It's like, nope, that's a hit song, and we're going with that.
You turn that practice deal into one of the most iconic riffs of the rock and roll era. I mean, there are people that they could not tell you another Guns N' Roses song, and they know that.
Within a second.
Yeah, correct.
And Slash's solo is tight on it, it's hot, and when they bring it down low, where do we go now? And then they build it back up. I mean, I can't imagine they ever did not do this song after they recorded it, or even before that. As soon as it was in their repertoire.
Are you talking about live?
Yeah.
Yeah, people would riot if they didn't play it live. Mm-hmm. That's what you were waiting for.
Which I guarantee you, they probably are like, we don't want to play this again anymore. Just like Def Leppard is like, well, we don't. Sugar is like, if you go to a Leopard concert and you don't hear Pour Some Sugar on Me, right, you're going to riot.
Correct.
Same thing with this song.
Yeah.
But it's, man, is it like probably one, like you said, one of the most iconic riffs, that opening riff of his, of all time. And the fact that it resonated with so many people propelled this album into the stratosphere, right? And was ubiquitous everywhere in the summer of '88, and you couldn't turn on the TV without seeing the video. And this song, I think, crosses over too, right? In terms of, this is a song that you would hear at the time on top 40 radio. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, their only number one single. It's going to be played everywhere, right? So it gave them that. This is the like soccer mom, right? Going out and just kind of like when Extreme had More Than Words, the soccer mom oh, I got to buy the album. And then we're blindsided when they heard the rest of it. Right?
It's through the garbage.
Yeah.
And it was, it's funny too, because you're talking about like top 40 radio. You could hear the guy, on the local top 40, and hear the bad boys from LA, Guns N' Roses with Sweet Child O' Mine. Yeah, get out of here.
But it crossed over because, like Sheryl Crow covered it, and it was a big hit for her,
Yeah.
Right.
Everyone kind of liked this song, and because you knew it as soon as you heard it, then it's kind of part of the zeitgeist, and everyone is familiar with this one.
It's the song. It's the one song though that personally for me, I could do without it now. And some Guns N' Roses fans will agree. Some will be like, "What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. Are you nuts?" It's I'd like it, but to me, I'm kind of over it in the sense that
like me with Paradise City, I get it, man.
It's similar. Yeah, everybody's got their own kind of song that they could probably say on the album is like, what, overplayed, whatever. To me, it's just I prefer everything else on the album above it now. Looking back now, like if in 1988, I would not have said that in a million years.
Sure.
This was like, I played the hell out of this song for a couple years.
Of course.
But now when I go back and listen to this album, obviously my tastes have matured, the rest of it, I get more into the deeper cuts. And this is one that I'm like, I will probably, if it comes up, I may skip it sometimes, right? Mm-hmm. Or I may have it, I may listen to it, but just a brilliantly composed song, brilliantly played. Again, the video was excellent, right? It kind of played to everybody. It was on MTV and Much Music, it seems like endlessly on a loop. But, probably if you talk to a casual Guns N' Roses fan, this is probably their best song, right? Like this would be the song that someone who isn't a massive GNR fan, Sweet Child of Mine is like, if you ask them, what's your favorite Guns N' Roses song or what's their best track? It's probably this one.
It'll certainly make their top 3. I got a pretty good feeling. Yeah, I think you're right about that. Now, see, to me, and this album's a little long. It's like 54, 55 minutes, which, thanks to CDs, you could make records a little bit longer back then. Most of the albums we review from like the 70s and even the early 80s, between like 35 and 43 minutes. So this is long, which means great, you get more music. To me, though, these last 3, although there's some good stuff on here, I don't love these last 3 songs. And if they had not put any of them on the album, and shorten the album by that much, I still think it would still be amazing.
Interesting.
Well,
that's just me.
We're going to have some disagreements here in a minute.
That's good. I like that. That's what we're here
okay.
for. Let's get into You're Crazy.
I heard this song. To me, when I first had this, it was okay. This was kind of the throwaway one. Until I heard it on Lies. And the Lies version is a million times better. It's slower, it's nastier, it's acoustic. To me, this is kind of, it's got more cursing in it, which I love. And I think they did a much better job on it. To me, this almost sounds like they needed another song, and they kind of had it kicking around. They're like, here, just put this on there. It's real, after Sweet Child of Mine, this is kind of the train picks back up again. I mean, it's fast, it's hard. It's not a bad song. It's just, if you could have gotten rid of anyone on this one, it would have been that one.
What do you think, Chris?
I'm of the same opinion that the live version I like the song, but the live version for me, the acoustic version is 1,000 times better. Mm-hmm. And I would love to see them play it in that way live. I think it would be fantastic.
Yeah.
But it's, to me, it's one of those album cuts that now, if I listen to this album now, I appreciate this song much more, and I actually enjoy it much more than I did back in the day. Absolutely, when I was listening to this album in 1988, I probably lifted the needle or pressed fast forward after this one, and actually I probably jumped right to Rocket Queen and skipped right over Anything Goes. But it's one now that I think I have a much deeper appreciation for, and I enjoy it when it comes on. Like I'll be like, it's a little bit different, and after a song like Sweet Child of Mine, it kind of fits where it does on the record. But that live version, oh man, absolutely.
I agree with you as far as it fits where it does on the record right after Sweet Child, because it's pretty thrashy. And I feel that Slash's solo is Motorhead-ish, it's pretty heavy. Of course, he's dropping F-bombs. Here's the thing. When I was a teenager, when I hear You're Fucking Crazy, I thought that was cool as hell. It hasn't aged that well for me. I don't like it as much as I remember liking it back in the day. And I think that's, and it's a little, to me, the song sounds a little scattershot. And I think Jackson's right. Like, they needed another tune. Maybe they didn't quite finish it as much because you're right. The Lies version is better. It's like we finally worked this into what it should and could be.
Right.
So yeah, I'm not a huge fan. Nor am I an enormous fan of the next one, Anything Goes. What is that? Is that a washboard at the beginning? What are they doing there?
Yeah. the thing that I like about this is that this kind of aged a little bit better for me because I know this is one of the old like Hollywood Rose tunes.
Yeah.
So they kind of, you can think about them playing this back in the original days. I always liked the theme in this one. Like, this is going down my way, your way, anything goes, whatever, let's go. Come on, here we go. Yeah, just left over from the club days.
Mm-hmm.
There was a great thing on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. They said something about name something that sounds insane, but it's true. And Tracy Guns posted, "I'm the Guns from Guns N' Roses." So I don't, just the old club days.
I saw that. Yes.
Yeah, I'm like that. You know what? That is right. I don't know how that would have gone with him instead of Slash. We'll never know. But he figured out what everybody else would figure out in the future, that it's really hard to work with Axl.
Yeah, he got in on it early.
That's right.
Definitely.
Correct. But yeah, to me, that adds to the mystique of the song, just that it's one of the old club songs.
Right. Yeah, for me, it's this. Honestly, this album is a greatest hits album, right? Like, it's one of those ones that will kind of always be looked at that way. And this one, I don't have a lot to say about it just because it never really landed on my radar in terms of one that, again, now, yes, I have an appreciation for it. And I'm like, yeah, it's a cool track. Back then, forget about it. Like I said, I would have skipped over this on my record player and dropped the needle on Rocket Queen, which is killer. But Anything Goes is one, if there's two songs on this album that I would have dropped off, it would have been to, again, shorten it and make it a little bit more concise. It would have been this and probably Think About You.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay. Well, because this one's down and dirty and sleazy. I actually like Slash's talk box guitar on here. And there's a little bit of back and forth between him and Izzy, kind of like trading licks a little bit, which I always like, very Judas Priest or Iron Maiden, but not as crazy and insane thrashing, just really cool stuff on there. I think it would have been a good one for Sorum to be on, because Adler kind of had this cool swing that kind of helped shape the sound, but Sorum was a straight-ahead badass rock drummer, and I think he would have added a little something to this song that maybe Steven didn't. It's just my opinion.
Interesting. Okay.
It also kind of devolves a little bit at the end, and I'm like, yeah, this is them just finishing it up, trying to put something together on it.
Right.
But let's get to Rocket Queen, because this is an infamously famous song.
Oh my God!
And obviously you love this one, Chris. Get us into it.
Wow, this one to me is a perfect finisher for the album, right? Like it's such a filthy song, right?
Filthy.
Like, it kind of sums up everything this album kind of was about, right? With the drugs, the alcohol, the sex, the sleaze, and we'll get right to the chase and talk about what they recorded in the studio, Axl and whoever the girl was that he brought in, and the break on Rocket Queen. It's actually going on.
Yep.
Legend has it. Yes.
Legend has it, and it's, again, thinking about like this music out at the time and what was out there, and this album comes out, and all these songs, and you get into this song, and man, this is just like in your face. This is who we are. This is what we do. It sounds sleazy. It is sleazy, and it's one of, I think, the better deep cuts on this album. That is, if you ask like a real Guns N' Roses fan, like, give me an example of a song you think represents these guys really well. To me, this is one of them. It's just like, yes, and it's a song too that you don't want your parents hearing. I'm going to play this loud, and I love it.
Right.
This is the best song on the record. I love this song so much. The beginning part with Steven Adler's drum part, it's intricate, and he kind of sets the tone for it. And then Axl Rose comes in with just the attack vocals. If I say I don't mean anyone and say these things to you, and it's fantastic. You go into it, it's nasty. Just with the venom that's coming out of his voice, and then you get that thing in the middle. Yes, the sexual part it's fantastic to hear. It's still great today, but back then. But then at the end, when he goes into it, changes gears at the end and slows down, and he's belting it out, and it changes from being nasty to like, it's almost like this guy who sees this woman like doing crazy things, and like he actually like cares about this person. The only thing I wanted is to know that I still care. At the end, I'm like, oh, that changed. We changed gears on that, and just the high register at the end. It really just kind of showcases the band. And there's a couple of tracks. There's a couple of YouTube videos of Adler playing this fairly recently, and just to see the joy on his face, I really wish they could work it out where he could be, there for some of it. He really, if they're going to play the old stuff, he needs,
He can't.
He had a stroke, right? He had a stroke.
Yeah, he can't walk and chew gum, man. He's in bad shape.
Which is too bad.
I think he's doing a lot better now. They said because they asked him, like, well, why don't you have Steve? Like, they can't take him on tour.
They won't even take Matt Sorum, and he's still awesome. They're not going to take Steven Adler.
yeah, but it's too bad. He really was a huge part of the early this record, and I think he gets to showcase it on this track, and that's why I like it. And to your point before, it was your point, Chris. It's one of those ones where if you'd never heard it before, Guns N' Roses fan would say, you got to hear this. And,
exactly.
And you'd say, why have I never? I mean, obviously there's the parts that they could never play on the radio, but it's just a great track, and I love it.
Okay, all right. So here's where the difference comes.
Oh boy. Uh-oh.
Okay, do it.
Okay. I think it's great that it starts with a cool groove. It's got a groove to it at the beginning. It sounds good. Gets into his sleazy rock lyrics, and you hear. We think it's Adriana Smith, who was a stripper, who kind of dated Steven, who Axl says, I need you to do this. She's like, okay, I'll do it for the band and for a bottle of Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
Like, that sounds right. And at the time when I heard that story back in the day in high school, I'm like, that's so rock and roll. That's so cool. I wish I was a rock star. But I'm listening to this thing. There's this break in the middle that's very arena rock, but it just doesn't seem to fit. It just seems to slow down with the ringing guitars. It's like there are two songs that were both unfinished, and they kind of mashed it together. And then, it's got her moaning. It's got her moaning, but it's not like him really moaning in Welcome to the Jungle, where he's going, You can really hear that. You really have to listen for it. Whereas I remember it when I was a kid, I'm like, that was all I could hear was this girl getting it, in the studio. And now it's like, it's not even there. It's kind of like an afterthought. And I'm like, between that being kind of, it's a little gimmicky. I mean, it's cool, dirty rock and roll gimmicky, but it's still gimmicky. You're smashing two songs together. I remember loving this song. Like, dude, let's sneak over and listen to Rocket Queen. Now I'm like, it's still very just kind of... It's very much the essence of Guns N' Roses, but I got to tell you, I don't really like the song that much anymore.
Okay, well, that's why we're here. We're not here to agree on everything. That would not be very much fun. But I remember, it was like, okay, put it on. Is your mom home? No, I think she's out. Okay, cool. Crank it up because if anybody ever heard that, they'd be like, okay, that's going in the trash.
Yeah, we'll listen to NWA next. Let's just listen to Rocket Queen real fast.
But I get it. I get where you're going with that, Mac. It's certainly, it's a distinct song with like you said, the two different almost parts to it. But I love the complexity of that though, and the way like so many of these songs on this album. Like again, this is another 6-minute song. That has so much going on musically that you really you take it as one whole piece, and you're like, wow, these guys were like brilliant song crafters and writers.
Yeah.
And some of this stuff is just like mind blowing. You think about, especially the condition they were in.
Exactly.
Recording and writing a lot of this stuff that this one to me is just like it puts this album over the top and ends it, I think, perfectly. I don't think you could have picked a better song back in the day when you actually would sit down and lay out the album and decide which order the tracks were in, which doesn't happen anymore.
We talk about it all the time on
right?
the show. Yeah,
it's such a huge thing that you actually had some thought into. Okay, what are we going to go with as the first song? Bury some stuff in the middle, and then end like this is just, I think, the icing on the cake for this album. It ends it on like, this is who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Bam, in your face.
Drop the mic.
Right, yeah. We're out.
And somehow, like Don't Cry and November Rain, they were in the air, but they weren't ready for this album, right? Like they held on to those for a couple of years and put those on the next one. Like, God, that's kind of amazing. They had those ready.
When you think back that, like, I think Estranged was in there too, as like all these tracks that they had written that showed up on Use Your Illusion that were actually like, potentially going to be selected for this. When I heard that years later, it blew my mind because those songs on the Illusion albums, Axl wanted to go in a whole different direction.
Right.
So I would be really curious. It would have been amazing to see the difference had they recorded a couple of those for this album. Like, what would have November Rain actually sounded like on Appetite for Destruction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Like
how
very
different would it have been?
Yeah.
But anyways, it's mind blowing when you think of the amount of material they had written at this time, and then considering they ended up having really essentially 3 studio albums and they were done.
Yeah,
like it makes me wonder what else is out there, maybe that they've already, any stuff that might have, right? And I'm sure they've got stuff that would have been written in 85, 86, 87 that they haven't actually. It's in a vault somewhere in demo form.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see what was out there.
Probably been in $10 million worth of lawsuits over the years of like who owns it, who gets
exactly.
rights to it, all that kind of stuff. All right. Are you guys ready to rank these from 12 to 1?
Ooh, sure.
Okay. Yeah. Let's do it.
Do it.
All right.
Why not?
We'll go guest first, Chris, then Jackson, then me.
Okay.
Number 12.
Okay. Number 12 for me is Anything Goes. And for all the reasons what I talked about just a minute ago, it's just a song for me that's, doesn't, I appreciate it. It's not one that I'm going to seek out and listen to on the album. I'll play it if I'm listening to it in track order. But for me, it's one of the ones that if we were cutting this album down to 10 and making it a bit shorter, I would sacrifice this one.
I would say, if you're talking about sacrifice, I would say You're Crazy. Because, again, I'd skip it. I'll listen to the live version. So that's my number 12.
You guys are going to freak out. Number 12, Rocket Queen.
Oh, head on the chopping block right off the bat.
I know.
That's all right.
All right, number 11.
Number 11 for me would be Think About You. And that's the only 2 that I'm dropping from this album. You drop those 2 to me, this is a front to back 10 songs greatest hits album. And they don't have to release anything ever again.
Yeah, and they almost didn't.
I would agree. I would say that's my 11 also, only because it's not a bad song. It's just kind of a throwaway. It's just You're right. It's you could have dropped that, tightened it up, and it would have been okay.
Yeah, nobody would have been the wiser.
Right.
For me, it's You're Crazy. You're number 12, Jackson. Just it's not their best effort on the album, in my opinion. What's number 10?
Number 10 for me would be You're Crazy as well. Again, the live version, hands down, 100% better. And that one for me is kind of like the deepest deep cut on the album. Good song, decent song, but it's my lowest ranking of the 10.
Yeah, I think my 10 is going to be Anything Goes. Again, a great song, but to me it was just kind of a filler on this deal. I don't hate it, but I've got ones I love way more than this.
I'm with you on it, Jackson. Anything Goes is my number 10. It's got some different guitar stuff on it, which I appreciate, but it's just not as listenable as the other stuff to me.
Yeah.
Number 9.
Okay, this is good. This is now getting really hard.
Yes, exactly.
So this is, and you know what? These could change
from day to day. I understand.
For me, but these songs, all of these songs now are, in my opinion, excellent songs. I love all of them, and it's going to be really tough to rank where these all fit. So for number 9, I would probably go with My Michelle. And again, excellent song, and based on the strength of all the other songs, I'm just going to sit it at number 9.
Okay, let's see. I would say my number 9 is probably Out to Get Me. I mean, again, this is hard because they're all so great, but this is one that when I would listen to it, like when I look in the order of this thing, so it's Night Train, Out to Get Me, and Mr. Brownstone. Basically, I'm just waiting to get to the next track. I'm not going to skip it, but it's like, okay, yeah, let's go on to the next one.
Right.
I actually put It's So Easy as my number 9. I mean, like you say, once you get to this point, it's a lot harder, and it's going to be little things. And for whatever reason, I actually put not to foreshadow too much, but Out to Get Me is my 8. And those two probably could have easily been flip-flop, but that's where we are for me. What about you guys on 8?
Number 8 for me is Sweet Child of Mine. As I mentioned when we were discussing the track in depth, it's, to me, the song on the album that I've just heard so many times that I could do with or without it. Brilliant song. They're only number 1, obviously, for a reason, because it connects with everyone. I'm not going to listen to it as much as I did back in the day. But obviously, it's still a great song because it falls at number 8 for me. But I think all the other ones that are going to come ahead of it are a little bit better.
Cool.
Yeah, I would say probably for me, It's So Easy would be number 8. I mean, again, it's a great one. It's sandwiched in there. It's going back over. It really hasn't aged that well, so that's why I would kind of put that a little bit farther down on the roster.
And that's why I put Out to Get Me down there. It's kind of an outlaw song, but it's kind of like, yeah, you were a bad kid, Axl. They were out to get you because you were doing bad things. Number 7. This should where it get even more interesting here.
Oh, it's getting interesting for sure. I'm going to put Out to Get Me at number 7. I love the song, and it would probably move up or down a bit depending on where I'm at with what I'm listening to currently. But I actually love Axl's vocals on this. It's a great performance from him, and one that I think, like you said earlier, it's really like that teenage, like, everyone's out to get me, and I'm fighting back against it, but it's a great track. So number 7 is Out to Get Me.
Okay, mine would be Sweet Child of Mine. I gotta put that in there for what you were saying before, Chris. It's a great song. It's not my cup of tea, and it's been played I mean, I could probably just close my eyes and listen to the whole thing without having the music on. I've heard it so many times.
Agreed.
Fair enough. What was it? 7. Well, I put My Michelle in 7. Good song. What's number 6, gents?
I'm gonna drop in number 6. It's So Easy. So I think we've all kind of had it in that middle space or a little bit lower. Good song again. To your point, it's one of those ones that lyrically, it's probably not aged as well as some of the others, but still a fantastic song. And if you're listening to this album as one whole piece, it's one that I'm definitely not skipping over for sure. Number 6.
Cool.
Okay, my 6 would be My Michelle. We're gonna slide that in there. I really like this. It doesn't pack the firepower of the other tracks that are going to come after it, but still a great track.
I'm putting Paradise City all the way down at number 6.
Ooh.
Okay,
and that's honestly it's because it is the one to me that's been played way too much. And if you think about it, the first lines are great, but after that, are the lyrics any really good after that? No, they kind of repeat the same ones over and over again, especially when they're going fast at the end. And it's like it's the same song twice, only the second time it's like they did a ton of coke and they just can't stop themselves.
Which they may have.
Right. So, I mean,
maybe.
Not a bad song. Obviously, they have to play it, and I bet it's a lot of fun to close the show with. But that's where I rank it. It's number 6. All right, top 5, gents.
Yeah, the top 5 are, again, getting harder and even more interchangeable. I would probably throw Mr. Brownstone at number 5. Had no idea when I was 17 what this song was really about, like we talked about before. And man, brilliant, right? Like, let's write a song about heroin and addiction and how we love it. But yeah, it's again, I could probably rank this depending on where I'm at, as high as number 3 or 2 even. And it's one of my favorites on the album.
Okay, I would say I'm going to put Paradise City in there just to kind of get it. Probably after thinking about it, probably should have been a little bit lower. But to your point, Mac, it's a great anthem song.
Yeah.
But there's really not a lot of content in there. So yeah, that's going 5.
And 5 for me. Think About You. I know you guys would leave it off the album.
Wow.
But to me, and it honestly, back in 1988, wouldn't have made my top 10 either.
No.
But in listening to it back now, because it is different, because I know the hits so well, and I know a lot of the deep tracks really well, this is the one that I kind of rediscovered. And in listening to it a couple times, like, this is better, and it's different. It's just different because Izzy was basically gone after Use Your Illusion. Done a lot of solo stuff that I've never heard. It makes me wonder, I wonder if there's some Izzy stuff out there that I need to go discover, because this one's not bad.
Yeah, I would bet you're probably right. He never had any big hits, but I was kind of thinking the same thing. Like, there's no way he could have come up with all of this stuff and then just dropped off. It never had another song. So I think you're right. I'm sure he's got catalog stuff in there you'd want to hear.
Just a thought.
Okay,
That's
so
a
where are
great
we
thought,
now?
Yeah. Number 4.
Number 4. Well, number 4 for me is going to be Paradise City. I still love the song. I know you guys have it a little bit lower for the reasons we talked about, but this one for me is still, I think if you're more of the casual Guns N' Roses fan, you probably rate this higher. And for the reason that it's like their kind of epic, like we talked about, this is who we are live. This is our anthem. Mm-hmm. This is the anthem song for Guns N' Roses that was a big hit. And I still really like, how this song progresses, that great kind of quieter start and, through into the really heavy part. And this is, again, a top 5 for me. I think in any ranking, any day you'd ask me, I'd include it as a top 5. So number 4, Paradise City.
Very good.
Okay, I'm going to go 4, Welcome to the Jungle.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, again, I love it. It's a great song. I definitely had more of appreciation for it now, going back and listening to it. But there are others that I like better than this.
That's fair enough. Yeah, I understand. For me, it's Mr. Brownstone. I remember listening to it as a kid thinking, oh, man, I don't want to get into what they're into, but I'm digging, what's coming out of it, this tune. And it could serve as a warning if you took it that way.
Sure.
So I just think it's heavy and it's real. So I'm putting Mr. Brownstone, number 4.
Oh boy, we're into the top 3 now. Yeah, number 3 is going to be our track we talked about just a minute ago, Rocket Queen.
Oh wow!
Which again I think is to a real serious Guns N' Roses fan is like, yes, this is like the down and dirty GNR that I love, and the complexity of the song and what we talked about with kind of almost 2 different songs. I think it actually works beautifully meshed together with that crazy interlude in the middle. And this is one that I again will probably include in my top 5 every time. It's not falling much lower.
Okay. Number 3 for me is Mr. Brownstone. I like the way it sounds. This was probably my first track that I liked, like the deep track once you got off the singles. And yeah, just the cautionary tale, but also like, I mean, they do a lot of heroin, but they're still pretty cool and they get to do a lot of fun things. And could it really be that bad? I mean, it kind of sounds like it's pretty cool. Don't ever do it. But I don't know. I love it. Yeah, it's just like it. It's like I said. It's like you've got this friend. I know this guy, and he's crazy, and he does a lot of crazy things, but he lives this crazy lifestyle. And for a minute, I can be in that world with him.
Fair enough. For me, it's Night Train, man. Love this song. I mean,
great one. Yeah.
I think some rock magazine, what was Kerrang or somebody, it was like top 10, drinking songs of all time. Mm-hmm. This was like number 8 or something like that. I'm like, yeah, everyone's kind of been there at one point or another, So yeah, I'll take Night Train to number 3.
It's a great song, and that's why it's number 2 for me. I think it was a great choice as the last single in North America. We talked about it being, kind of thrown out there before in the UK, but this is a song about cheap wine. Yeah. Like, come on, right? Like, amazing. But it's I think it's gonna maybe sound weird. I think it could be like one of their signature songs.
Yeah.
And again, it's right because it's again taking that experience, what they were doing at the time, and this is who Guns N' Roses are. We booze like nobody else did back in the day.
Yeah.
And I think this is, if I remember correctly, I think this plays usually in their set list kind of around the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Of their set list, or as an encore song. And I think it's for many reasons, I think it's probably a good choice for that. So Night Train number 2.
I would say Night Train number 2 for me also. I love the whole thing about, the drinking and everything. That's awesome. But to me, the riff is great. It's really heavy. It's straight ahead. And what I love too is, and we didn't talk about this before, Duff, when he kind of he's doubling the rhythm part of that, bum 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 bum, down underneath. He doesn't get enough credit for what he does on the bass. And then the Ready to Crash and Burn, just that, again, like that, yeah, when you're a kid, you're like, yeah, we're going to get some Night Train. You're not really going to drink Night Train because I think you will go blind.
Yeah, probably.
It's so bad. But yeah, just that, like, yeah, like there's part of me that wants to do that and just be this badass rock and roll guy.
Yeah. Love it.
And for me, number two, got to go with Sweet Child. The opening alone, I just can't deny its presence in my brain and in pop culture, especially for that summer or two. It's big time. I mean, it's definitive Guns N' Roses, kind of the epitome of Guns N' Roses sound, and I'll put it at number 2.
Good choice.
Which leaves...
Ooh, drum roll, number 1. Well, number 1 is, in my opinion, their signature song and the song that defines them. It's my favorite Guns N' Roses song. Quite obviously, it's Welcome to the Jungle. And if you ask me, or many other fans probably that have this ranked number 1 as well, it's the song that encapsulates Guns N' Roses, what they're about, what they do, who they are, the best. Like I said at the outset, that intro, I think, is absolutely a top 5 all time. And when it delves right into the main riff and you get going, like when that song comes on anywhere, I will still crank the volume up in the car. Even I'll stop, I'll hear it, like, you might hear it somewhere it's played at sporting events a lot, but it'll actually stop and I'll be like, I'll wait. I'm like, yeah, there it is. There's the beginning. Yeah. Here we go. And I have that moment of like, yeah, this is it.
I will have to tell you that if they play it at a sporting event, I get upset because I'm like, I want to hear the whole thing. I don't want to hear just the beginning and then we're going back to the game again. Let's just
that's a valid point.
Okay, everybody, let's just take 4 minutes and 31 seconds out of the game
and rock out.
Yeah, you'll thank me for that.
Does that song, like, so for me, if I'm seeing them live, like, I want to hear that song as the first song. But I think it probably shows up in I don't know where it is in their live set list now, whether it's an encore song, because usually they leave the big stuff for the end. But I think they should open every show with Welcome to the Jungle.
Because you want it to be the house, they're doing whatever, and then the house lights go down, and then you kind of hear, like, it's not really the beginning, but they kind of, because I know, like, Slash will just tease it a little bit.
Yes.
Blah, 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 blah. And so you go, here it comes, and then you crank it up. Yeah, that would get the show going like nothing else.
Exactly.
Well, for my number 1, I already tipped it before, so it's Rocket Queen. I love it because it's got different parts to it. It's got a great, everybody's just playing their balls off on this one. It is a little strange now to think about it, that it does seem like it does have a pretty hard right turn, but I just love the nasty part at the beginning and almost the, as much as he can muster, sweet part of Axl Rose at the end. He gets to sing in the high register, and it's almost, to me, like at the end of it is like he's trying to communicate with this person who, like, is just not, I give up. Like, this is what I wanted. I can't do it. So, whatever, I'm leaving. And so it's a great deep track. I think if you haven't heard it before, if you just stuck to the hits, it's you missed out on it. So that's why I love it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Well, and of course, very chalky, but my number 1 is Welcome to the Jungle. Just the best. Echoing everything you said, Chris. If you're going to say, what is Guns N' Roses about? How do they put it into one song? This is it, And even the video, even with Axl's teased hair, it was just such a great way to introduce the band to America and to the world.
Yeah.
And I don't know that they do open with it, but I do think it's early in their set. Because you kind of have to, don't you? I mean, you're welcoming them, to the show. It's got great Slash work on there. It's got great little pieces on it. Killer Guns N' Roses.
We had talked, or I talk a lot about making my time machine, working on that. One of the things that I would definitely be on the list of things to do is to see them at like the Whiskey or the Roxy or something, like right before they broke, 86 or even 87. Just a club show with them would be phenomenal. So to anybody who actually got to go to those shows, good for you. Definitely a moment in time that they were all on point.
You want to tell us where people can find us on Twitter, or what you're up to, that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. So I am on Twitter, obviously, my rock and roll heaven at Rock These Tweets, and do all kinds of music related content and delve into great discussions in the Twitter community about rock and roll with fine gentlemen like yourself. Also on Instagram, My Rock and Roll Heaven, and Facebook as well, which I need to get back into doing a little bit more on Facebook. And currently, as I mentioned, I'm a little bit of a hired gun out there in the podcast world, guesting on shows like yourselves, but have some things in the works that I'll be hopefully announcing as we get into 2022 in terms of a podcast from myself. But it's been great to be on the show, and I appreciate your invite. This was a ton of fun. We'll obviously have to do something again.
You bet.
Absolutely.
No, we've had a lot of fun. Obviously, you have great passion for it. You've got great knowledge. You're easy to talk to. And, yeah, I mean, the other shows that you've been on, Def Lep Pod, The Hooks Rocks, with Jay, those are great shows, So I love that we love having our little show, but I love that we are able to meet folks like you who have shared this passion and this knowledge and don't just want to keep it to yourself, or, your wife doesn't care. She doesn't want to know anymore. You got to share it with somebody,
exactly.
Right?
That's you hit it, the nail on the head right there. Exactly.
Yeah, there's nothing better than having that conversation. Like something comes on the radio. Hey, did you know that they recorded that? No, I don't care. Be quiet.
all the little trivia you spew.
Correct.
But,
yeah.
As you said, there's a great community of people out there that love rock music, and there's great podcasts out there. And kudos to you guys for getting this going, getting your podcast going. And I love the variety of material you have on there is fantastic. So lots of good things to come from you gentlemen. I have to ask though, where did the Ugly American in London podcast name come from?
Yeah, I came up with the name right before I moved, and it was kind of a Motley Crue thing. It's like if we have a famous name, we're already famous. And so you put the Ugly American, which is a kind of common turn of phrase, and you can see me, though the listeners can't. I might fit the bill. And then there's American Werewolf in London. So you put those two together. It sounds like something you've heard before, although it's really kind of unique to our show.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, thank you, sir, and have a great week, and we will definitely have you back anytime.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, that wraps episode number 63 on Guns N' Roses' amazing debut, Appetite for Destruction, which really kind of took the world by storm. Though not right away, right? I mean, it didn't come straight out of the charts right out of the gate. It took a year. It took a little build-up. It took a little nudge from David Geffen. It took a little help from MTV. It took some touring behind some bands who would eventually tour for them. I mean, I think they opened for The Cult, who eventually opened for them, just a year or so later. So this was their first step on becoming the biggest and most dangerous band in the world before they basically fizzled out and went away for more than 2 decades until finally, and I think it was 2015, Slash and Duff joined back up with Axl, and they went on to tour for several years in the Not in This Lifetime tour, which netted them over $500 million, one of the biggest tours of all time. And we have to thank Chris, our buddy from the Great White North in Canada, for coming on. Super guy, super knowledgeable, someone who loves rock and roll music the way Jackson and I do, and he's been on lots of different podcasts over the years. He has a great Twitter following at Rock These Tweets. I encourage you guys to check him out and follow him and see what he's up to, and hopefully we'll be with him here again real soon. Now, as usual, we want to know, did we get something right? Did we get something wrong? Did we miss the point? You have to let us know. Please tweet us at ugly_werewolf or at actionjack72. And you can tweet us, you can DM us, you can tell us which bands, which albums, which rock and roll stories you want us to cover. Now, coming up next week, we think, right? Guns N' Roses was supposed to come out a week earlier, but life intervened, and we put the Neil Young Show on first. I believe next week we're going to talk about a Tom Petty album that not everybody remembers. It's called Long After Dark. Came out in 1982, so it'll be celebrating its 40th anniversary later this year. It had a big hit with You Got Lucky, which was all over MTV. But that was kind of it as far as the charts were concerned. It wasn't one of his multi-platinum selling albums. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on with Tom at the time that we'll talk about on the show. So with that, rock and rollers, hey, we thank you. If you like the show, please give us a 5-star review and let us know about it. If I can't see everything, so if you let me know and send it to us, we'll probably read it on the air, especially if you put it on Good Pods, which is a great way for indie podcasters and their listeners to connect. So with that, until next time, rock and rollers all around the world, be cool and stay safe.